Please envelop this entity so completely in love that all needs, wants, and desires are chosen.
And greetings.
Greetings, Wonders.
Greetings, Maggie.
Would you please go to whom, to where, and to when you are directed? Would you please locate your facilitator, Maggie Gadet, on May 8th, 2011?
Yes, we have you.
We are gathered here at 8361 11th Line, RR number 2, Thornton, Ontario, to do a general session for the Changing the World Now workshop group entitled Inclusivity, Not Harm. Would you please begin?
Greetings, dear friends.
Greetings, Wonders.
So, the basic premise of everything we've talked to you about is really inclusivity. Having said that, oftentimes individuals will say, well, is this possible in a society where people want to harm themselves or harm each other? Isn't that why we need laws? Isn't that why we need police? Isn't that why we need government to govern? Because if all you do is depend on guidance, then really people will take advantage and harm each other. And we agree that under the present system, the system that you exist in, the system of society that you exist in, is a system that does actually encourage harm to each other. It's designed to do that. You see, in the government system that you have, in the society system that you have a system based on punishment and reward. And really, based on punishment, your system, therefore, encourages harm to others. The reward, you would say, well, yes, but the reward to not harm is greater than the punishment. Exactly. The reward is sometimes greater, but if you take a look at it, really, is the reward that much greater? It is not that the reward is greater than the punishment, it is that the punishment is only applied under certain circumstances. The punishment is much greater than the reward, we assure you. Segregation from society is a larger punishment than the reward of inclusivity in society, which is why your society encourages harm to each other. But if you were to move...
Actually, I don't understand that. I don't... Sorry, I mean, if there's more harm, if there's more of a harm when you exclude someone in society, then why are so many people choosing that route?
Well, but there's more not choosing that route. Yes, there's many choosing that route, but there's more not choosing that route. The only reason they choose that route is because they think they can get away without being harmed. In other words, it becomes a game.
Okay.
You see? Some get caught, some don't. And as long as some don't, there will always be people willing to try. Do you see?
Okay.
So the resultant is that you do live in a society that encourages harm to each other and to yourselves. But if you move to a society of guidance, we would suggest that as you move towards self-empowerment, individually and collectively, what will happen is society will no longer have a necessity for punishment as a way to remove harm from the society. In actual fact, self-empowerment means quite simply that you would recognize for yourself that harm to another is harm to yourself. And why would you choose to harm yourself if you were empowered? And if you did harm another, you would end up truly choosing your own direction through guidance of compensation, of appreciating the other.
There'd be no need for segregation?
No. So eventually what would happen, of course, is society would no longer need that which it perceives as a necessity now. So it means a fundamental change to your society, away from a society that encourages harm to a society that really doesn't necessarily discourage it, a society that allows it, agreed, but while allowing it, encourages such self-empowerment that harm is not part of the equation. When you are a self-empowered individual, there is no harm included in the equation. You see?
Right. There's no desire to harm another because it's really
It's not
just
even
harming
there.
myself. Yeah.
It's not part of the concept. It's not part of the mentality. It's not part of the belief structures. It's not part of the psychology. It just is not there. It's a non-issue. Do you see?
Yeah.
So the resultant is, of course, then you move to that state and you become an inclusive society, and in a society where all is included, you can harm, but it's never chosen to be harmed. So right now you live in a society that fears harm, which is why you have become a society of control, a society of governing that loves to be governed, where, yes, eventually you would move away from that fear, and as a result there would be no necessity to govern, no necessity to control. Is it? You do recognize there is a transition here.
Right.
You would transition from a society that in effect encourages harm to a society that encourages self-empowerment.
Right.
As you move to a society that encourages self-empowerment, the incidence of harm would decrease to the point of being virtually none. And then when there were incidences of harm, there will always be some. When those incidences of harm do occur, it wouldn't be punishment that the individual would get. It would be, in effect, guidance to recognize the extent of harm, not just to another, but to themselves, so that they would not choose, through empowerment again, to harm themselves.
Yes.
And therefore not harm another.
Well, it reminds me of the statement you gave us, the seed of the sentence, nothing and no one can harm you unless you choose to allow it.
Yes.
And people, there's a lot of issues when people hear that. Most
Yes.
people hear that.
Of course there is.
Whereas,
Everybody wants to blame someone else. Everybody, again, this is what we're saying. Self-empowerment is not exactly an easy journey, is it? So it's easier to blame. It's easier to assign the blame to another. And when you assign the blame to another, then you must have a society that is punitive. And then when you have a society that is punitive, then you must have a government that governs. Otherwise, it's an impossibility. One thing must lead to another.
yeah.
There can be no other choices. You don't live in a society that allows for other choices. Do you see?
Yeah.
Fascinating, isn't it? Now, if you were an inclusive society, well then in an inclusive society you do allow the choice to harm. You do allow the choice not to harm. The choices are allowed, they're just not exercised. You see? And that's the difference. When you are truly a self-empowered individual, you have the choice to harm another, but you simply don't choose, you don't exercise that choice. Do you think? It's not something you actually even consider.
Because it's not empowering.
Exactly. It would be disempowering to consider that choice.
Yeah.
It's allowed, but it's not considered.
Yeah.
You see the difference?
Well, just like how everything is allowed, hate. It just...
That would be an inclusive society, yes.
Right.
It's all allowed, but it's not chosen. You see?